The night my daughter told me to leave my own house was the night I finally understood how invisible I had become in my own family. I remember standing in the living room, holding a small cup of tea that had already gone cold, while she and her husband stood across from me with the kind of expressions people wear when they believe they are absolutely right. "Mom, you can't stay here anymore," my daughter Emily said, crossing her arms. Her voice was calm, but there was a firmness in it that cut deeper than shouting ever could. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. "Excuse me?" I asked quietly. Her husband Daniel sighed dramatically, as if the conversation had already happened 100 times. "Look, Margaret, we've been talking about this for months. This house is too small for all of us, and Emily is pregnant now. The baby needs space." I looked around the living room slowly, the same living room I had decorated 15 years earlier, the same walls I had painted with Emily when she was still in college, the same couch I had bought with my savings after working double shifts at the hospital. "Too small," he said. "This is my house," I replied softly. Emily shook her head impatiently. "Mom, please don't start that again. Yes, technically the house was yours years ago, but you moved in with us after Dad died. Daniel and I have been paying the bills." Her words hung in the air like heavy fog. "Technically yours." I almost laughed, because the truth was something they had never bothered to ask about. After my husband passed away 8 years earlier, I let Emily believe that I had sold my business and retired with barely enough to live comfortably. I dressed simply, drove an old car, and avoided talking about money. I wanted a quiet life. I wanted my daughter to love me for who I was, not for what I had. Apparently, that had been a mistake. Daniel walked toward the window and gestured toward the street. "We've already found you a place. It's a senior apartment complex about 20 minutes away. It's affordable, and honestly, it's probably better for you." Better for me? I felt my chest tighten, but I stayed calm. "Affordable?" I asked. Emily nodded quickly. "Yes, Daniel spoke with the manager. It's perfect for someone your age." Someone your age. I was 62, not 100. And when exactly was I supposed to hear about this plan? I asked. Emily exchanged a quick look with Daniel before answering. "Well, tonight." The silence that followed felt enormous. I stared at my daughter, the little girl I had once carried through hospital hallways when she had a fever, the girl's college tuition I had paid without her ever knowing how many sleepless nights it took. Now she was looking at me like I was a problem that needed to be solved. "I see," I said quietly. Daniel checked his watch. "Look, the moving truck will come tomorrow morning. We already packed most of your things from the guest room." For a moment, I simply stood there. My things, packed, without asking me. Something inside me finally shifted. Not anger, not sadness, just clarity. "All right," I said. Emily blinked in surprise. "That's it?" "Yes." "You're not going to argue?" I shook my head slowly. "No, I won't argue." The relief on their faces was almost painful to watch. Emily sighed and smiled slightly. "Good. I knew you'd understand, Mom." Understand? I understood perfectly. I finished my cold tea, placed the cup on the table, and walked to my room. That night, I packed a small suitcase myself, even though they had already boxed most of my belongings. But there was one thing they hadn't packed, a thin folder I kept hidden in the back of my dresser drawer. Inside were documents they had never seen, property records, ownership agreements, legal contracts. The next morning, Daniel supervised the movers, while Emily sat on the couch scrolling through her phone. When I came downstairs with my suitcase, she barely looked up. "Your cab is here," she said casually. Cab. I stepped outside and looked back at the house. No, not the house. The building. a 4-story apartment building that Emily believed belonged to her and Daniel because they had lived on the top floor for 3 years. 3 years during which they had proudly told friends that they had invested wisely in real estate. 3 years during which I had quietly paid the taxes, maintenance costs, and mortgage through a property management company. 3 years during which they had never once asked how the building had actually been purchased. I got into the cab and gave the driver an address. Not the senior apartment they had chosen for me, but the office of my lawyer. When I arrived, Mr. Whitman was already waiting. He had been my lawyer for more than 20 years. When I walked into his office, he looked at my suitcase and raised an eyebrow. "Well," he said, gently, "I assume the conversation finally happened." "Yes. And they asked me to leave." He sighed heavily. "I'm sorry, Margaret." I sat down across from his desk and slid the folder toward him. "I think it's time." He opened the folder and nodded slowly as he read the documents. "So you're ready to tell them?" I thought for a moment. Then I shook my head. "No, not yet." A small smile appeared on his face. "What do you want to do instead?" I leaned back in the chair. "First, I want you to remind them who actually owns that building." 2 days later, Daniel received a phone call from the property management company. At first, he thought it was a routine issue. Then the manager said something that made him freeze. "Mr. Daniel Carter, we're calling regarding your occupancy in the building at 84 Maple Street." "Yes," Daniel said. "We've been informed by the property owner that your lease will not be renewed." "Lease?" Daniel said sharply. "What lease? I own that apartment." There was a pause. "No, sir," the manager replied politely. "You are a tenant." Daniel laughed. "That's ridiculous. My wife's mother lived here before us. She gave it to us." "I'm afraid that's not correct. The building is owned entirely by Mrs. Margaret Lawson." Silence. "What?" Daniel whispered. "The entire building belongs to Mrs. Lawson." Upstairs, Emily was in the kitchen when Daniel burst through the door. "You need to call your mother," he said, urgently. "Why?" "Because apparently she owns this building." Emily stared. "That's impossible." But deep down, something inside her already knew. And for the first time since they had asked me to leave, my phone began to ring. Again and again and again.